Anytime we start discussing database design and especially table design, always come across the question of should we allow nulls in our fields or should we not allow nulls? And let me give you a general guideline to go by here, and that is, do you want to fight? Anytime your day's going too good, everything's running too smoothly, there's nobody really upset or yelling or threatening each other, then if you get too much of that, then just open a discussion about nulls, and that'll take care of that problem pretty quickly. This is one of those things that people just always see it from a different perspective. This is the classic Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Democrat, Republican, all this sort of thing. People just see this from different perspectives, and it's kind of bizarre to watch. But anyway, the definition of null means an unknown value. Good example of this might be a phone number in a database. I know your name, I know your address, I know your email address, but I don't know your phone number. So I can leave that field null in that column for that row. But the problem with that is now I'm storing unknown data, and I think I'll get it later, but I'm not sure. And so what you're going to get is database purists who say, you know what, I can store unknown values just out in the air. I don't need to store them in my database. What's the point of a database that's full of unknown values? That's the same thing as not having a database, isn't it? So when we're talking about nulls, we're not talking about empty spaces. We're talking about an unknown value. And Microsoft and Ashton Tate and a bunch of other companies helped to confuse us here with some of the early implementations in our database technologies back in the 90s. Now understand that a null is not a space, it's not a -1 or a 0, and people will do all kind of things to try to indicate this stuff. The bottom line here is, if you're going to use nulls, use them, but don't do this space stuff and -1 and 0 and all that. So let me give you a couple of options. Option number 1 that you're going to hear from people: do not allow nulls. So what you're going to do there, and I actually did this in a video in this course, and I believe it was the one on normalization, and it's where we had the table that had the certified information being stored, the status column, and had certified. And instead of storing potentially unknown data, we just added a new table, created a one-to-one relationship to that new table, and then we only stored the data that we needed. Now the drawback to that is that anytime I want to pull my certified people or know if somebody's certified or not, I have to do a join, because I have to join those two tables with a query. And that can be a performance issue. Joins are going to be a performance issue. In the real world, your joins can hit 8, 10, 12, 15 tables really easily, even larger than that. Now, your other option is, well, you know what, I'll just allow nulls in the table. Now, understand, allowing nulls in the table doesn't mean your database explodes and everybody dies and all that kind of stuff. It just is a different way of doing things. If I allow nulls, then this can create issues when inserting and updating tables, because I'll usually put a default value that goes in if I don't mention that column, and so I may be putting data in there that needs to be changed later but it's not been flagged, or I can just allow null to go in there. When I have nulls in the database, this is going to create query issues, because when I query, I have to check for conditions of is null or is not null, and that's a function that's built in, because I can't say where, category or where status equals null, because equals null is not even a rational idea. If I've got a box that's got something in it and you don't know what it is, then how can you say anything is equal to something that you don't know what it is? Be careful with that. Now let me just leave you with this. No matter which way you go on this, somebody's going to beat you up on it. So make your best decision. Make sure that you document it completely. If you want to, put your justification down there, but hear me well. When somebody starts complaining too much about how you're constructing your database in regard to nulls or not nulls, here's what you do. Get their name and compare that to the name of your supervisor and the person who's signing your paycheck. You know where I'm going here, right? There's always somebody out there in Nerdville who's going to have something to say about using nulls or not nulls. You can do just fine allowing them or not allowing them, as long as you think through the process and understand the problems that each, or the challenges each, is going to bring to the table. But just make sure that you think these through. Use whichever ones you like. I can tell you, go to the bookstore, pull down the books, and just look in the index and look up nulls and go read the authors. Some of them will have you think that only absolute nut jobs put nulls in their tables, and then others will give you a very laid out, systematic reason for why you should allow nulls. So just make the decision yourself, think it through, but you need to be aware of these issues. One last thing before I leave. Be careful if you're working in cross-database situations, because, for example, if you're hitting an Oracle environment or a DB2 environment, those databases may treat nulls differently than you're treating them in SQL Server. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Nulls can be problematic, but they don't have to be. Just think it through and understand what you're doing and why.